China's economy relies heavily on manufacturing in order to keep growth alive. It's important to use China's PMI as an indicator to determine global economic conditions. If the world isn't buying, China isn't building. The domino effect is felt as many countries have found themselves in a frightening situation. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today, the big news is China's manufacturing index hitting a March 2009 low. We're going to get into this and also, of course, the domino effect and how this is really branching out into the rest of the world. Here is the chart of the day. China's manufacturing, the PMI. Now, over the years, it has become negative. It isn't always positive in growth. There are different stages that have occurred over time here. And you could see, however, it is the lowest since March 2009. If you remember, March 2009 was the lowest point where the S&P hit 666. So that is right at the bottom of the recession right there, being at such a low level. Now, this isn't the only indicator. I've been covering literally hundreds on the channel showing that we are at the Lehman Brothers moment. This is just one more of those. How many more do we have to total up here before it gets serious? Let's look at this here. They devalued their currency, and this is the third day in a row I believe they've done this. And this doesn't necessarily mean much because they are fluctuating. It's going up, it's going down. We need to see the trend over a few years, but it does give us sort of a warning flag for what could happen. Is this the beginning of a new trend downward, or is this simply a bump in the road? We're going to have to keep our eyes on this one, that's for sure. It is absolutely crucial to see the exchange rates. Speaking of exchange rates, we're now seeing Brazil's currency at a record low. This is the USD and versus the Brazil's currency, and you can see actually how it is specifically at this time right now hit a record low. Previously, it was over a decade ago, and it isn't looking good for what's going on in Brazil. We have right here, as I'll show you, high rates of inflation. Now, you don't need to get into the details of these particular charts, but that's what it's showing you, that they are encountering high levels of inflation. I have many subscribers who are from Brazil, and of course they tell me about the economic conditions there not being so favorable for them at the moment. And this is what happens when you have high levels of inflation. It hurts the people in their pocketbooks. They are going to feel that immediately. People think that, well, as long as the inflation is kept within the nation itself, then of course no problem. Everyone's okay. It's only when you have a foreign exchange rate that you have an issue. I don't agree with this. In fact, if you look at any country that's engaging in a hyperinflation, they're not swimming in money. They're not loving the wheelbarrows of cash. It never worked like that as far as I'm aware, and all the hyperinflations that I've studied. But perhaps if you're from there, you could tell me how wonderful it is. Let's move on to this. Hundreds of full-time New York City workers are homeless. Let me just repeat myself here. Hundreds of full-time city workers are homeless. Why? If they're fully employed, why are they homeless? This is out of MarketWatch. And you're looking at this. It costs an average of $78 a day or $28,000 a year to provide single-person space in shelters. That's $105 daily or $38,000 a year to house homeless families. More than 100 of the 1,000 parks workers, more than 100 of these 1,000 parks workers represented by one union local are living in homeless shelters. Now think about that. That's a significantly large percentage living homelessly. I can't believe it. I didn't even think this was the case because I figured if they were at least part-time employed. But you can see how in the previous video I showed you, they're lining up around the block in order to live in what I believe is called Section 8 housing. Basically the lowest income people struggling, trying to get some government paid housing. And then you have this, full-time employees needing to live in homeless shelters. Okay, so we have the situation that occurred during the financial crisis. What is the government going to do with all of the homeless people, all of the poverty, and all of the social assistance programs? Well, look at this. This is from my book. The U.S. government took over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. This was just after the subprime mortgage crisis. And of course, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac holding what they said here, their debt of nearly $6 trillion. And of course, that's burdening the U.S. citizens. So imagine $6 trillion of garbage being flooded into the system, kept on the off balance sheet of the U.S. You cannot make this stuff up when you have extreme levels of poverty. And how's the government going to help when they have trillions upon trillions of dollars sitting off balance sheet that they can't even admit to yet because they simply don't have the funds for it? Let's look at this. This is a Google Translate, but you can see what I'm referring to here. Deployment of U.S. nuclear weapons in Germany. So we have this constant back and forth with Russia, with the U.S., the proxy war that is occurring, and they seem to have stepped this up because if my memory serves me correctly, 20 nuclear weapons have now been put on the border of Germany and Russia in that area where this is really being stepped up right now. There's no need to want to move 20 nuclear weapons up against these two countries. It's really starting to heat up in that area. I wanted to throw this into this video, although it's not related. Pentagon-trained rebels in Syria are reporting to have betrayed their American backers and handed their weapons over to Al-Qaeda in Syria immediately after re-entering the country. This isn't called betrayed their American backers. This is called doing what they've been told to do. This is the way this has been working for quite some time. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are the exact same group of people. They're just a whole bunch of disorganized rebels, what they call moderate rebels, which is a complete joke. That's just a name they use. And I think the quotes around it are very accurate because it's a joke. But essentially, they're the same groups of people, all trained by the US, by the UK, primarily the US. And this is what's been going on since at least 1979. We know that specifically. Division 30 was the first faction whose fighters graduated from the US-led training program in Turkey, which aims to forge a force on the ground in Syria to fight against what today in this article they're calling ISIL, but it's ISIS, it's IS, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. They are being funded by the US. We've seen these articles before. I've shown you it specifically. And here's just more information. I have to throw that in at the end of articles now because they are not liking it when I make entire videos about it, and I can't take any risks in that way. So I'm just going to mention it at the end of each article as the information comes out. Hope you'll appreciate that. We're not going to lose out on any information. I'm going to share everything I can, but I sort of have to sneak it in there. Okay. If you found the video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you found the video informative, you're going to find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. We got diagrams, charts, everything to make it really easy, break it all down. You can flip through, check it out for yourself, go over to Amazon and see it there. Take care.